Good evening, friends. Welcome to Monk Chat with three monks tonight here at MP Cloud. We have Bhante Sudaso, Bhante Sumano, and Bhante Pamutto. I'm not in this order. But you should know by now who is who. If not, you can ask.
If not, you can check out the new webpage.
Oh, but it's not up yet.
Oh.
You will soon be able to check out the new webpage. Hello, welcome to Geeta, who already has some questions, which is wonderful. And hello to Elaine. Good to see you, Melinda, Ned, AP, Mark, and Mary. Welcome, friends, and welcome to the other friends that I see only as a little number on the screen. If you have any questions, if you're new actually to Monk Chat, what we're going to do this evening is any question that you put in the live chat, what I will ask, I will be the moderator, and I will ask it to the Venerables here for this evening. All right, so if you don't have a question, think about a question and type it in, or if you have it already, type it in already. But we'll start with Geeta's, who says, Bhante or Aya? Excuse me. So it will be Bhante this night. Can you please speak to the teaching of cessation of perception and feeling as taught in the suttas? Maybe Bhante Sudaso can start.
They always give me the hard questions. Well, first off, I'd just like to say that if you're not a non-returner, then you really don't need to worry about the cessation of perception and feeling because you can't enter it anyway. So the cessation of perception and feeling, Sanya Vedeta Nirodha, or sometimes called Nirodha Samaptiti, the attainment of cessation. This is a state of concentration which can only be reached by somebody who has completely overcome sensual desire. So by definition, it can only be reached by a non-returner or an arhat or a Buddha. So I'm not really sure what to say about it. It's a state in which perception and feeling have completely ceased. And yet the body is still alive. So basically the mind has completely ceased to operate entirely. And yet one is still alive. Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Bhante. And the second question, I think is a follow-up, is also from Geeta. Does one need this state of meditation for realization of the Four Noble Truths? For example, world transcending Dhamma?
As far as I can tell, no. As far as I can tell, it's not required, but rather it's something which one may develop in the course of one's practice. In particular, again, around the attainment of non-returner and leading up to arhat. It may be part of one's practice at that time. But as far as I can tell from the suttas, it isn't a requirement to become an arhat. Rather, it's the pinnacle of the perfection of samadhi. But if one is a wisdom arhat, for example, one doesn't necessarily develop this kind of samadhi attainment.
Great, thank you. And AP asks, I would like to change my last name to a Buddhist Pali word. Can I choose a name myself, or is it commonly done by a monk or a lay person? Bhante Pamutto, you seem like you want to answer this question.
You can tell from the expression on my face. It's commonly one asks a spiritual mentor. So just like the precepts, you're often approaching somebody in whom you have respect and who you look up to give just an honest assessment of what kind of name might fit your personality. And yeah, that way it also has a little extra significance But there are no rules for this. The reality is that in many traditionally Buddhist countries, it was just normal for people to ordain, even for just a short time. So they would all get Pali names by default. And a few of them, after disrobing, would carry on with that Pali name as a way of maintaining a sort of, they call them pundits, or sort of, is still a layperson, but somebody who considers themselves knowledgeable in the Buddhist teachings and wants to be a figure in the lay community as well. So in the West, we don't have this tradition where everybody goes forth, everybody spends a little time as a monastic. And in that respect, I've known quite a, probably 6 or 7 lay people, which with such a small pool of people who are regularly coming to the monastery and consider themselves like deeply committed Buddhists or taking lifetime precepts, to have that many people say, okay, I want to take this extra step and I want to have a Pali name. Like, I so want to integrate in the community that you talk to me in the same way that monks talk to each other. Soma, Sudaso, Sumino, Jayasara. This way we've kind of let go of our birth name in a way and taking on a spiritual name. So if you want to do it, I suggest you go to a teacher in whom you have faith and talk to them about it. They may actually convince you not to do it, in which case you should consider that. But otherwise, they can probably help you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Bante. And hello also to some other friends who have joined us in the meanwhile. Hello to Eleanor, Elaine, Michael, Bobby. Good to see you. And Liz, our good friend from Rockaway. Wonderful. Lots of good friends. Great. And Michael is asking, a big part of Buddhism is letting go of desire. Should you let go of desire for the advancement in your career? And this is a great question for Bante Sumano.
Yes. I'll say a little more. Don't worry. Yeah. So when we talk about letting go, it's important to know what we're letting go of. I was reading a sutta the other day that was talking about, where sensuality lies, where the craving and desire that comes up for beautiful bodies, nice tasting food, etc. And you realize that it's all in the mind. So it's not, that somebody who has a certain type of body is automatically and objectively sort of alluring. But rather, when we encounter these sorts of situations, people, food, music, whatever, there's something in our mind that sort of wants to latch onto them. So when we're letting go of the process of latching on to something. So in the case of a promotion for a job or advancement in your career, it's not that you start to hate the fact that your boss wants to give you a new opportunity, or that you intentionally try to sabotage your efforts at work or anything like that. But rather, you let go of the mind state that says, I can only be happy if I'm the president of the company. I can only be happy if everyone looks up to me and everyone respects me and I make the most money, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because when you look at that mind state, then you realize that you're pinning your happiness on something that's totally out of your control. I'm not sure what industry you're in, but most of the industries that I know of, you could work every hour of every day of the entire year. And whether you get ahead or whether you advance is totally up to the whims of your supervisor. And then there's 100, 200, thousands of people who want the same thing that you want and are doing the same thing that you're doing. So if you're just looking at it from a perspective of, does it make sense to want all of these things? Then the answer is kind of clear. But even the desire for sort of that advancement is something that's very uncomfortable, because what you're cultivating then is discontentment. You're cultivating constantly looking to the future for a source of happiness, rather than seeing what the situation is right now and seeing what you can do to be happy in this moment. So someone had asked after a meditation we had here at the monastery, she ran a business and she didn't understand the concept of letting go in this case too, because it was like, well, I run a business and the point of a business is to make money, along with other things, I suppose. So do I just let go of my business? Do I let it crash and burn? And it's like, no, but you change your focus. So rather than just focusing on making tons of money for the sake of making money, you focus on what you're doing in the job or in the position or the situation that's actually useful, beneficial, and helpful, both for yourself and for other people. So rather than I'll only be happy if I'm the president and CEO of this corporation, respected by people and lording over my subordinates, you look and see how the position you're in now helps yourself and others. And if there's a position higher than that where you can help yourself and others even more, then it's something worthwhile to do. So it's sort of like looking at our intention, our motivation. It's not that promotions are inherently terrible or that being a CEO is inherently terrible. Well, anyway, but rather, what's the mind state that you're cultivating? Is it discontentment and greed, or is it renunciation, compassion, loving kindness? So I would say once you figure out your motivations, then the answer becomes clearer.
Great. And we have another question from Eleanor. Eleanor is asking, some release their anger by doing sports, art. What do you think about that? Is it right effort? Is it wrong? Pantisudasa?
Well, ultimately, we're looking at result. And there's different layers of result. So when dealing with a harmful emotion like anger, the first thing is making sure that we're not strengthening it, we're not participating in it, we're not building it up in any way. The next is to see what we can do to reduce it and to prevent it from arising again in the future. And it can also be helpful to understand what's led to it arising in the first place. Why is anger arising in the first place? So anger always arises as the result of defilements, as a result of some kind of attachment or aversion or misunderstanding in the mind. And it's also necessary to understand what the emotion feels like while it's present. So to be clearly aware as it comes into being, as it changes and as it passes away. So just doing some kind of activity to get your mind off the anger so that it fades away, that's okay, and that it's a way of getting the anger to fade away. But it's not the best, because it means that the person is probably not developing a deep understanding of the arising, changing, and passing away of anger. They're not developing a deep understanding of what causes the anger to come into being in the first place. They're not developing a deep understanding of what the anger feels like while it's present. They're not developing a deep understanding of how to eliminate anger directly. But it is wholesome that they're trying to stop their anger in some way. And it is wholesome that they're doing something to diminish and reduce their anger. So it sounds to me like a better than nothing, but nowhere near the ideal. That's my thoughts on it anyway. I see Ayasoma is giving me the nod of approval. She's an expert on anger.
I'll take it as a compliment. Anyway, Sadhu, Bante, for your answer, not necessarily for my expertise in anger. Comment.
She didn't get angry when I said that.
So it was a test.
Very zen.
Yes, the teacher put me to the test.
She passed.
Okay, wonderful. And Mark is asking, in Buddhist cosmology, is there anything like the Hindu concept of yugas? 4 great cycles where the 4th, the one we are supposedly in, is the worst, and after that the universe begins again? Bante Pamutto.
In Buddhist cosmology, well, you can find the Buddha saying all of this stuff is happening. Like he had the ability to recollect past existences. And he said there are eons where the universe is expanding and eons where the universe is contracting and eons where the universe is expanding and contracting. So yeah, just about anything can happen and probably is happening somewhere at this very moment in some world system. But that's the difference. So in other religions, in other cosmologies, there may be the concept that this one thing that is happening is the only thing that is happening, or that there is a way of classifying samsara as it always goes through the same cycle. In Buddhist cosmology, it's more like the cycle is a cycle of suffering. So you go up, you go down, you continue cycling through rebirth after rebirth. But the way the universe is composed is always changing. In some ways, that's really appropriate. You would almost expect that we would get good at this whole samsara thing if it was always the same.
That's great. Thank you, Bante. And then he's asking, dear Venables, is there a reason why we like what we like? Or is it just arbitrary? And who better than a Greek type can answer this question?
Yes, there's a reason. Well, from one perspective, actually, nothing is arbitrary. Everything is the result of causes and conditions. Some of those causes and conditions are from way back in the past that we can't even remember them. Some of them are just a little bit in the past, yesterday, last week, last month, last year, and some of them are happening right now. So actually, one thing that comes up as an example for me was I was never into marshmallows when I was a kid, because I had no concept of what marshmallows were. It was this very like American man-made food thing. But one day I was visiting a friend's house and he had marshmallows and I had one. I was like, oh my God, what is this? This is amazing. And I will admit that there have been a couple, maybe several occasions where I've eaten an entire bag of marshmallows within 30 minutes in the past.
Not as a monastic.
Yes.
Yeah.
Last week.
I was going to say,
We had
you
a
might not have
camping
been
trip.
there.
We had a camping trip and we did have marshmallows, but I restrained myself.
To half of that.
Even less, really.
Yeah. Only maybe half a bag. So yeah, progress. But anyway, the point is, I didn't have this desire for marshmallows until I experienced it. And then after experiencing it, now I like them. I didn't like them before, I experienced it, and now I like them. The same thing, unfortunately, happens on a different level with addictions. So a lot of people, like let's say people who have an addiction to alcohol, they're not born alcoholics, but they do have this tendency, which lately scientists have found is genetic in a lot of ways, this more likelihood of being addicted to alcohol if they do end up tasting it. So you have an alcoholic, or at least someone who's prone to alcoholism, who has never had a drink and never will, well, they'll never like alcohol. But you have someone of a similar makeup who does encounter alcohol, and they'll have this reaction to it, this addictive, I must have alcohol sort of reaction. And that's not necessarily from something that they did in the present. That's coming from the result of having this body that has this genetic history, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So that's an example of something in the past, but not way in the past. Now, further back from that, it gets more complicated because we have amnesia. We don't remember. We can't see how things we've cultivated, sometimes for lifetimes, are manifesting now in the present. So I would say that if you like something and it seems like there's no reason why you would like something, that there are these underlying causes that you can't always see. Sometimes it's just because of experiences we've had. Sometimes it's genetic, if you will, hereditary. And sometimes it's just the cause of past experiences playing out now in the present.
Great, thank you. And AP is asking, if lying to another person prevents him or her from committing an unwholesome action, then is it breaking the 5 precepts? Bhante Pamunto?
2 wrongs do not make a right.
That's right. And Bobby says, AP, that sounds like the burning house in the Lotus Sutra. Bhante Sudaso, do you know what he's referring to?
Mm-hmm.
Would you care to elaborate?
Yeah, I can talk about the simile of the burning house. So the simile of the burning house, for those who don't know, this is a story from the Lotus Sutra. Very well-known simile. There's a handful of things in the Lotus Sutra that are interesting, and a lot of things that are not interesting, but a handful that are interesting. One of the interesting bits is the simile of the burning house. So the story goes that there's a wealthy man who has a mansion, and his 3 children are playing inside the mansion when it catches fire. And so the wealthy man thinks, I need to get my children out of the house. How can I do this? So he goes in and he sees the 3 children playing with their toys, and he tells them, wouldn't you much rather have like a nice wagon pulled by a donkey? And one of the children says, yes, that sounds great, and runs out of the house to go get their cart with the donkey. But the other 2 are not interested. So he says, well, how about maybe a steel cart pulled by a brown horse? And one of the others is like, okay, I'll take that. That sounds great. And they run out of the house, but the last one's still there. So the man says, well, how about a golden cart pulled by a white stallion? And the last one is finally like, okay, I'll take that. And they run out of the house. So by the way, for the record, I don't remember the exact details of the simile, so I'm just making up the details. And I don't remember the exact details of the 3 kinds of carts, but the idea is that there's one cart which is functional but not very fancy, one that's kind of moderately fancy, and one that's super fancy. So then when the 3 children get outside the house, they actually find that there's just 3 golden carts pulled by white stallions. There's no wooden cart with a donkey. There's no steel cart with a goat or whatever. Like there's just 3 golden carts with the white stallion. But none of them are disappointed because they got something, all of them got at least what they wanted, if not more. So this then is meant to be an illustration of skillful means, of doing what you need to do in order to help others make progress towards awakening. And another point of the simile, by the way, is actually to say that all paths lead to Buddhahood. That even if you think you're practicing the Arhat path, that you're still going to wind up being a Sammasambuddha eventually. Mm-hmm. That's actually the main point of this simile. The point of it is not about lying to people in order to get them to safety. The point of the simile is actually that all paths of practice lead to Buddhahood, to Sammasambuddhahood. That's actually the central theme of the Lotus Sutra, by the way. The central theme of the Lotus Sutra is that arhants will all eventually become Samma Sambuddhas. But yeah, then the question comes up. So then basically what this is saying is that the Buddha talks about the path to arhantship, but after becoming an arhat, you'll still eventually become a Samma Sambuddha. So then people say, well, isn't that implying that the Buddha is lying? And the answer is no. Because the Buddha is doing the best he can within samsara to help guide people towards awakening. So he's using the tools that are available within samsara, the methods of practice, the descriptions of the path, and so on. He's using the tools that are available that help point people towards awakening. So are his descriptions perfectly accurate? No, because they can't be. We're working within samsara, which is a messy, complicated place. And we're trying to describe using words something that is beyond words. So the Buddha is doing the best he can within the limitations of language. So that's also the point of this simile, is that ultimately we're trying to guide people towards awakening. And in the process of doing so, we do the best we can with the tools at our disposal. So again, keeping in mind that this is about guiding people towards awakening. And in particular, it's about describing the path of arhatship to those who will be inspired by the path to arhatship. Describing the path of the Pacceka Buddha to those who will be inspired by Pacceka Buddhas. And describing the path to Samma Sambuddhahood for those who will be inspired by Samma Sambuddhahood. But that ultimately all three of those paths culminate at the same achievement of full enlightenment. That's the point of that simile. It's not meant to be used as a justification for lying to people. That's not the point of that simile. Though you're not the first person to make that connection, which is actually one of the dangers of the Mahayana Sutras. So the Mahayana Sutras contain a lot of really valuable and useful material for contemplation and practice. However, much of it is meant to be taken metaphorically, and if it's taken too literally, then people can come to very harmful conclusions which are not in line with Dhamma. Okay?
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante. That was very useful. And Eleanor is asking, I often find myself multitasking, not sure why, as I have all the time I want. Do you know why we multitask and how to stop? Why do we try to keep ourselves busy all the time? Who wants to answer this question? Great.
I have a very short answer, so maybe someone else would elaborate afterwards. But honestly, I think the best answer is to investigate that for yourself. You can spend years listening to someone try to describe your mind to you, but honestly, you're the expert on your mind. So when you do find yourself in these situations, really ask yourself, like, why am I doing this? Why am I running myself ragged? Why am I seeking out suffering? Why am I intentionally putting myself in harmful situations? Why am I doing things that I know are going to cause me to suffer and do them anyway and keep doing them? And once you really make space and time to figure out the answer to that, then that will be much more useful than me trying to guess, really, what works for your mind. Because even though there is a common experience that we have as human beings, it is true, though, that we do have our particular affinities and things that repel us, and just certain intricacies and idiosyncrasies of our mind that we are the best people to sort of understand. So yeah, I would say, look, when you find yourself in one of these moments, really look and see. And I know in my experience, when I've done that, well, I'm not always happy with the answer. But it's always been useful because then I can go like, actually, this is what was at the root of all this.
Great. And Elaine is asking, in a Theravada tradition, does rebirth occur immediately after death of the node? Or are there states of bards, I guess bardos? Thank you.
Big one.
Any volunteers? No?
I mean, I can answer this one.
Okay, great.
This is a point of controversy.
Mm-hmm.
The common answer you'll hear is that rebirth occurs immediately. But actually in the suttas, the Buddha speaks in a number of places about there being an intermediate stage between existences. So those particular mentions in the suttas tend to have gotten swept under the rug in the subsequent 2,500 years of the development of Theravada thought, but they are there in the suttas. But what did the Buddha mean by that when he spoke about there being an interval or a space between one life and the next? We don't know. He doesn't go into any detail on it. He doesn't talk about how long it lasts. Does it last a tenth of a second? Does it last 30 some days, as they say in the Tibetan tradition? I forget. How long is the Bardo state? 32 days or something?
It's up to 49.
49 days? Okay. 49 days? I see more nodding.
I thought I remember 40. Yes,
40?
49.
Anyway, somewhere between 30 and 50.
It doesn't have to take that.
Yeah, as I recall, it can be shorter if your wisdom is really strong. Anyway, in the Pali Suttas, it's just not talked about as to how long it can last, whether it's always the same length or whether it varies depending on conditions, or what it means to be in an interval state, what it feels like. No description at all. So going strictly on the Pali Suttas, we really have next to no information to answer that question, except that there does appear to be the possibility of having an interval state between two existences, between two births. Okay.
Furthermore, one of those mentions of the interval state is the type of non-returner that gets fully enlightened in the interval.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah,
it's in there.
Great. Thank you. Very interesting. And Diane says, we have Michael who says impressive to something that you said. I don't know which variable, but someone said something impressive. And Diane says, I would like to thank you all for sharing the Dhamma. I live in a very rural town and I'm so happy to find a Sangha. Oh, well, you're always welcome, and we're happy to have found you online as well. And Diane's question is, do Maras live in a realm like the Devas do? Can one be reborn as a Mara? Can they become enlightened?
Yes, to all those questions. Yeah, Mara, the Mara is also called King Mara. He's considered the highest of all the Devas. I think there is one Deva that's considered technically higher, but he's unaware of Mara's existence. So Mara is secretly the most powerful. So yeah, there's a whole realm, and in the Pali Suttas, there's one instance where Mahamoggallana catches Mara and kind of gives him this like grandfatherly kind of talk about a previous existence, and he describes several Maras. He's like, you were my nephew and my sister's son. And so there's it's a whole class of beings, probably. I don't know from experience. So
Great, thank you. And Michael says, my impressive remark was in regards to marshmallow consumption.
Not to Dhamma.
Yes.
and here I thought it was about one of the inspiring answers to the questions.
So did I, which is why I had to clarify Michael's answer because it was quite funny. But
Well,
yes.
I have to say, eating a whole bag of marshmallows, that is a feat. The closest I came was when I was about 20. I ate an entire box of Oreos by myself.
Wow, there's a coming out of sorts
impressive.
tonight at
Yeah, I
Monk's
had a
Chat.
stomachache for hours.
I felt fine.
Bante Pamuto, do you have any confessions to share as well? Any goodness of greed?
Excessive consumption of sweets at some point.
Are you kidding? Like I was a forest monk, like living in the woods. You think I want to take the food out to the woods? So yeah, I'm given an entire chocolate bar. You think I want to be sleeping with that next to my head when there are bears roaming around? I eat the whole chocolate bar and I say, okay, I'll put it to use over the next few days.
All right. So we're starting to learn that the food preference of the Venerable is sugar.
So, Ayasoma, do you want to chip in on this one?
Since my monastic life, actually, I'm quite dispassionate about food. But yes, in the past, I've not sugar. But
Twinkies.
no, I don't like
Versus Little Debbie's.
Little Debbie's.
pasta, pizza. We talk, things more substantial. Yes, she knows. And Eleanor says, can someone recover from an addiction or an eating disorder with meditation only? Bante Sumano?
I suppose theoretically it's possible, but I wouldn't recommend anyone actually try. Because, what was it? Addiction and what?
Addiction or an eating disorder?
Eating disorder. Yeah, so theoretically possible for someone who is very, very advanced on the path. So you hear stories actually of, say, forest monks, like super attained forest monks who have had the ability to heal themselves of illnesses, have heart attacks and be able to sort of keep themselves going until they get help, etc. But while we can sort of romanticize these images as the sort of potential of, Buddhist practice to help us overcome ailments, it's also good to keep things real in some ways. And one of them is by recognizing that these people were not just ordinary human beings who lounged around in their couches and watched TV all day. These were people who were striving for nibbana and putting their life on the line to do that. And they developed a practice that, I cannot compare, I have to say, at least not in my current state. So I think for most of us, when we have these really difficult sort of afflictions, we have to recognize our limitations and our capacities. And we have to recognize when we do need the help of trained experts who have dedicated their lives to figuring out how to help other people with these ailments. So, oftentimes people ask the same question as it relates to mental illness as well. And if I'm meditating, then I can stop taking my anti-psychosis medication. And the answer is no, that's a terrible idea. Especially without the help of someone who knows how these things work for the specific patient, but also even in general. So as far as someone who has an addiction or eating disorder, Buddhist practice can be very complementary. It can be very helpful, especially to help that person understand sort of how the process of addiction might play out in the mind. But it's also important to recognize that there's a element of addiction, especially, that is purely physical. And by that, I mean hormonal, related to the blood, very sort of subtle and something that you can't touch with just a regular everyday meditation practice. So in cases like that, which are 99.99999% of cases, you do need to seek out the guidance of a trained clinician who can help with those disorders, and also seek out the guidance of helpful Buddhist teacher to help with the spiritual practice. So these two things can complement each other. But I wouldn't recommend that someone discard sort of modern science and medicine to help them with these disorders just to practice Buddhism, just as I wouldn't recommend a practitioner discard Buddhism and only focus on sort of healing the body. You want to heal the body and the mind together. And medicine and clinicians, psychologists, psychiatrists, they're not in opposition to Buddhist practice usually. So these two things can and should go hand in hand in these situations because they're very serious, and done in the incorrect way can be very harmful, sometimes irreversibly so. So tread carefully, I would say.
And Eleanor has another question. How does one let go of the desire to have one's body look a certain way? Was it hard for you to accept yourself as you are? Not meaning you look bad in any ways. You all look great.
Thank you.
Pante Pamuto?
I know I'm not a good one to. I've never had a problem with like hating myself. I really like Pamuto, so ask somebody who hates himself. I was just pointing over there.
I don't hate myself either. In fact, I've always quite liked my body, even though my body is not perfect. I've had chronic health problems most of my life, but I've never really had anything with wanting my body to look a particular way. No, it's not quite true. In my early teens, I had a little bit of insecurity about my appearance. But actually, for the most part, I'm quite happy with my body. So I would ask you to look, what is going on there? What's the underlying complex in your mind? Why do you want your body to look a particular way? Yes?
The person asking the question is a woman.
I was about to.
Male privilege. That's why you all don't have that.
Oh, Ayasoma, do you want to answer this one then?
Actually, I wanted to thank our resident Antoinette, who mentioned that the reason why, well, the first two monastics did not know exactly what you were referring to, and I suspect also the third one. Yes, but I mean, like,
the difference between not knowing and understanding that we're not the right person to ask about something.
Yeah, not knowing was not the pardon because English is not my first language, but not quite having that experience is because normally it's females who are having this experience, not because we're different, but just because society bombards us since day one that we're supposed to look in a certain way or have a body that is in a certain way. So perhaps actually we'll do, because this is not the first time that someone is asking this question, perhaps it's due time to actually do a talk on that. So put it on the, since I'm not on the panel today, and Antoinette is not a monastic yet, but she's working on it. I'll put it on the list of topics and we'll have a nice chat about that. All right. And Mark is saying, wouldn't a better answer to AP's question be a careful consideration of the karma involved if someone is about to kill someone and a white light diffuses the situation? This seems better karmically. So I think this is a follow-up to your answer to wrongs don't make up, right?
Yeah, no, this is really important understanding about the precepts, and that there's no such thing as a white lie. Like, lies are an intentional misrepresentation of the truth. And if we tell ourselves and we sort of protect this idea that lying can be appropriate at times, what we're really protecting is the delusion that there are lies that don't have harmful consequences. Now, as Bhante said, samsara can be a messy affair, and you may not be able to figure out a way through a situation. You may get presented with a situation where you really don't know what there is to say, and yeah, it may occur to you that if you say something that's inaccurate, it'll be the quickest way out of a situation. And you could call that skillful means, but you should never call that like not a lie. You should never call that not harmful. Like, you will get the consequences of that. You intentionally misled somebody. That person, even if you help them out, will not trust you in the same way next time. There's that story of the boy who cried wolf. In the end, the boy ends up, and nobody will believe him, even when he's telling the truth. So lies always have consequences. They're always unwholesome. Now, when it comes to these hypothetical situations, it's not the first time I've been posed these questions, like, what if the Nazis were breaking down my door and asking, are there Jews in the basement? And I say, we often think up these hypotheticals when we're not ready to face up to the reality that lies should be abandoned. And if anyone has been around somebody who has made a profound asseveration of truth, they would understand this immediately, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to clearly and without fear say something very honest. We were actually just talking about this in a conversation a few hours earlier, that there's in monastic communities, sometimes there can be all sorts of beating around the bush and attempts to develop procedures around nonviolent communications. And all of this can often just be trying to avoid a difficult truth that, if said, would completely diffuse the situation, allow everybody to look at what's in front of them. So yeah, I wouldn't ever encourage somebody to protect this idea of the white lie. I have never encountered a lie that didn't have harmful consequences.
Thank you for sharing that thought, Bhante. And was that the last question, actually? Perhaps it is. Maybe we'll have an early night tonight. Mm-hmm. But there is a comment from Michael who says, men can have body dysmorphia as well. So perhaps we'll give the opportunity to Bhante Sumano to share some words on that. Not that I'm saying that he has body dysmorphia. No, I'm not suggesting that. Dysmorphia.
Dysmorphia? I don't know this term.
Dysmorphia. It's the same in Italian, so I know.
I think it is, yeah. I think it is.
Dysmorphia.
So dysphoria is when you dislike something. What is dysmorphia?
Morphia
I think
means
it's when you view your body as being like something's flawed with your body. Yeah.
Morph means form, basically, and this is the opposite.
Yeah. Yeah, so I don't have experience with body dysmorphia in particular, but I did, when the question was originally asked, it was interesting because I think the person posting had assumed that we had all overcome, how was it phrased? If you could reread it.
Yes, I can read it. How does one let go of the desire to have one's body look a certain way? Was it hard for you to accept yourself as you are? Not meaning you look bad in any ways. You all look great. That's my favorite part.
So I hear, at least, maybe it wasn't the intention, but I'm hearing almost like an assumption that we have accepted ourselves as we are. And I don't know about the other two venerables, but I know that for myself, I haven't gotten to that point yet. So my experience growing up was interesting because well, there's multiple things at play. So I grew up in Jamaica, which is a mostly Black country. So growing up, I didn't necessarily have any sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Traumas around my skin tone or how I looked as far as my skin was concerned. And for the most part, growing up, I was pretty much unconcerned with looks and all those things. I was a very studious person, I guess. However, moving to this country for university, for college, one, I became more interested in sort of romantic pursuits, if you will. And also, I was suddenly a minority in a country that looks largely different than I do. So two of these things sort of happening when I moved sort of had this interesting effect on how I started to view myself. So on one hand, I became more concerned with how I looked in terms of, oh, do I look nice, attractive, blah, 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 blah. Am I wearing the right clothes? Am I thin enough? What should my hair look like? And all these things. And then also I started to notice that in the spaces I moved in, there was a preference for people who didn't look like me. So it was very difficult for me to understand, why rejection was happening in some cases, why I didn't seem to have the same sort of opportunities that other people that I knew, friends, actually had. And then, of course, there's an added complication of identifying as LGBT. And so just all these layers, pum, 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 all on top of each other, which can create sort of these neuroses in the mind, where you really do start to question your self-worth. You start to question if the way that you look has anything to do with your worth as a human being. And I think that's where a lot of people sort of have these traumas, actually. They're traumas around this idea that we get from society, from friends, from family, from whomever, that the way we look is mapped on to our worth as a person or to our value as people moving through the world. So for me personally, it was sort of peeling that away, looking really deeply at how these thought patterns came to be in the first place. So this was not, something inherent, but it was cultural conditioning that I had to learn and experience as I moved through life. And it was clear because I didn't experience it when I was in one place, in one setting, but I did in another setting, in a different place. So peeling back these layers and really looking at, oh, it does hurt to be rejected because my skin's too dark. Oh, it does hurt, to be rejected because, I'm relatively short. Oh, I am trying to go to the gym to look like this ideal person in a magazine. And once you start doing that, you start to see how much suffering you're causing yourself, honestly. Because what I came to realize the older I got was, one, the people who viewed other people in this sort of objectified way were totally delusional and super unhappy themselves, because those are the kind of people who are never satisfied with anything. So you could aim for this level of perfection that you'll never meet. And even if you did meet it, it wouldn't make them happy. And so once I could discard that, because I was like, that's too much work, honestly, then I had to look at the other part, which was the things coming from sort of myself. So starting to undo, well, actually, it doesn't matter if I look this way or that way, or if I wear this or wear that. What truly matters? And what I came to the conclusion of was that what mattered was the heart. And what mattered was the kindness and the compassion that I had, the level of caring that I had for others. It was things that were actually invisible, that no one could see if they just looked at me. And once I started to cultivate those qualities, once I started to put my energy and focus on that, there was so much more lightness and so much more freedom. Well, I'll admit, every now and then, because I sort of have a naturally somewhat muscular body. Every now and then, I'll see my biceps or something like that, and I'll be like, oh, those are nice biceps. But then I'll be like, oh, but then it doesn't really matter if they go flabby in like a couple years, which they will probably. Because what I've spent most of what I spent most of my time like actually cultivating was not going to the gym and working out my biceps, but rather working on my mind, working on being a part of a community where I can be helpful to others. And so once you start to make that shift, then it becomes easier. It's not easy, and especially, you know, I'm not a woman, so I don't have that experience, and it's definitely even worse for women. But starting to see that you're not crazy for not believing sort of this conditioning is like a huge first step, actually. And then surrounding yourself with people who value who you are, not because of how you look, is also helpful. Yeah. So stop listening to the, I was going to say something on PC, but stop listening to the messaging coming from others. Because a lot of times it's crap.
Yeah, if I could add to just that last thought, and there's also a lot of like thinking that we're getting messaging from others when it's not really happening. Like Bhante talked about, like getting rejection and assuming it's because of how we look. The reality is people don't think about us nearly as much as we do. They're thinking about themselves. And that's just the truth. So if somebody's rejecting you, it probably has a lot more to do with them than with you. Probably not even noticing you when you get down to it.
Great.
Actually, not to keep this going for too long, but I remembered actually some time ago I was going to a party with some friends, and you know, for parties people usually dress nicely and put on their best clothes and whatnot. And my friend turned to me and was like sharing, he was like, "Oh, I feel so self-conscious, like this is a new shirt, it doesn't fit properly." And I looked at him and I was like, no one cares. No one's gonna look at your shirt. They're too busy looking at their own shirts. And he was like, "Oh yeah, that's true." And he felt so much better. So basically everyone is my friend who thinks everyone's looking at their shirts, but really they're just focusing on themselves most of the time.
Great. Oh, thank you, Antoinette, for correcting. It's info@buddhistinsights.com to request talks, not info@buddhistinsights.com, like I misspelled. So yes, info, INFO @buddhistinsights.com.
There's no way to like say I didn't want to interrupt.
No, that was wonderful. Thank you. And thank you, Bhante Sumano, for sharing your thoughts, as well as Bhante Pamuto. See, you actually had to say a few things, Bhante Pamuto, and the Venerables all have to share.
I can say more, you know.
Now he's inspired.
Well, as monastics, we reflect on the body a lot. It's the first thing, you know, as novices, we're told, you know, look at the body parts and look at the body parts on the outside. Look at the hair, look at the skin, look at the nails and teeth. So we start doing this right away. But the reality is, we probably wouldn't even have made it this far to be monastics if we were obsessed with our bodies. So we are a little preconditioned to get past it. We are maybe just a little weird. Like, you know, it was about a year and a half ago. Somebody, my hair had grown out a little bit. And somebody said, "Oh, you got gray hairs." And I was excited. I'm like, this is great. I've had like a full head of dark hair, like, you know, for like decades now. It's getting boring. Let's change it up. Yeah, let's sprinkle in a little gray. That's awesome. So, you know, it's the changing of the body doesn't have to be a threatening thing. And once you realize that the body changes, that it shifts, you can actually get to the state where you're just like, oh, well, let's see what this is like. Like, oh, hey, you know, I've got a little something here. I guess I'm middle-aged. I'm almost over the hill. Wow, when did that happen? You don't notice unless you think about it. But when you think about it, it doesn't have to be threatening.
Right? See, this It's becoming the most discussed question.
Next
Most
question.
answered.
Who'd have thought?
All right. And in a change of topic altogether, Maitreya is asking, I heard that the Buddha Sasana will last only 5,000 years by monks. Can you confirm this is in the Sutta? Bhante Suddaso?
No, it's not in the suttas. So that's actually in the commentaries. In the suttas, the Buddha actually said that it would last for 500 years. And it's important to recognize that the word 500 appears countless places in the suttas and is generally understood by sutta scholars to not mean exactly 500, but rather it's just a generic word that means a lot. The same way that we say like, oh, I've got 1,000 reasons for that, but we don't actually mean 1,000. We just mean a lot. Or like, I've done that 1,000,000 times. We haven't done it 1,000,000 times. We probably just did it like 12 or something. But we say 1,000,000 just to communicate that it feels like a lot. So in the same way, the Buddha said that his teachings would last for 500 years. So he just meant it was going to last for a pretty long time, but not forever. It would have a long but finite lifespan. And the commentaries were written more than 500 years after the Buddha. So at that point, they had already figured out that 500 wasn't meant literally. So they were like, so when the Buddha said 500, he meant 500 times 10. So 5,000 years, that's how long it's going to last. But they're just making up a number. They don't know.
Great. Thank you. And Liz says, for all, what is the most important thing about Buddhism teachings that we probably don't know? All right. Should we start from Bhante Pamuto going through Bhante Suddaso all the way to Bhante Sumana?
But we don't know what she doesn't
Yes,
know.
exactly.
She said, for all. What is the most important thing about Buddhism that we probably don't know? As in, like, I assume she says we lay people.
But we don't know what they don't know.
What?
Well, okay.
You're being
I
a
got
little
one.
bit too literal.
Ignorance is not bliss. So we're all really confused because it
That's great.
seems to, like, how if we're ignorant of it, we understand. If we're ignorant of it, we don't know it. We don't know what you don't know. So how do we know what is the best thing that you don't know yet? We don't know. Ignorance is not happiness. This is suffering for us.
Okay, so that's one thing.
I've got one.
Great.
Whatever you think you are, that's not it.
Mm.
Most important thing that lay people may not know,
I
or
think-
just we, general we,
or the trippiest, most mind-blowing.
Is that the addition to the question?
Yes.
oh, the trippiest mind-blowing thing about Buddhism
That they may not know.
that they may not know. That the cause of suffering is clinging.
It's true. Otherwise, well, we also don't know it, because otherwise we would all be enlightened.
Drum roll.
Yes. It's actually so trippy that we all don't know that, even though we know it.
Because we only know it on the surface.
Exactly. All right. And I think that was the last question. So tonight we're having an early night.
Any questions from
The live
the audience, who never gets an opportunity to ask questions?
Our live audience is very silent.
Okay.
We have a bit of a dead audience.
That meditation from last night.
A live audience. I think that's all. Oh, and Art is saying early morning for me. Great. Yes, I hope you're having a great start of the day in Thailand, Art. And all right, I think that's all for today then, whether it's morning or evening or afternoon.
Mhm.
And if you live around the monastery, so in the New Jersey area in the United States, tomorrow and next Saturday will be our last afternoon meditations in the front lawn that you can come to. So if you're there 3 p.m., we'll all be gathering with social distancing and masks in the front lawn to practice meditation together and to listen to some Dhamma from the resident monastics. And then on Sunday, we'll have a volunteer afternoon to get the grounds here at the monastery ready for the spring. Or better for the winter, that then we'll get the. So if you can come in the afternoon, we'll be, I think, between 2 p.m. and 5 p.m. on Sunday. We'll be happy to see you then. And then for the rest of you all, as usual, we'll be meeting online Wednesday to Friday, 8 a.m. and 7:30 p.m. New York City time. So you can do the math with different time zones. All right, so we look forward to seeing you either this weekend or next week. And before I forget, Sunday morning there will be the third meeting with Bhante Sujato. So on hacks for the. Do you remember the
hacks? Life hacks for the end of the world.
Life hacks. There, I was. See, because we're a dead audience, I was forgetting the life part of the hacks.
Death hacks.
Death hacks. Life hacks for the end of the world. There's both death and life in the talks. Anyway, so on Sunday morning, you can join on. There's a link on our YouTube page. And if you can't find it, you can still send us an email at info@buddhistinsights.com and we'll send all the links. It will be broadcasted not from our channel, not from the Buddhist Insight channel on YouTube, but from Samhita ASBL, who is a great, wonderful monastery in Belgium. All right, so Michael says, are the Bhante Sujato talks going to be on YouTube? Yes, they are. They will be broadcasted live, so you can ask questions live to Bhante Sujato. It's all really good stuff. 9 a.m. also New York City time, but not on our personal channel. Though we will post the link, so if you're confused, you can go and tap it in. And Eleanor says, thank you so much. Feels so amazing to get to interact with you live despite being so far away. Really brightens my day or night as tonight. Oh, great. Lovely. We're very happy to spend virtual time with you all. It's always good to have spiritual friends. And on this note, we can end with 3 sadhus. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you all be happy and peaceful and attain supreme blissful nibbana.